Adolescence. We all remember what it was like to be an awkward teenager, to begin to understand who we are in this world, to mature, become the fully grown version of ourselves. I sure hope you didn't think about having sex, though. That shit is just for the confines of a loving marriage between one man and one woman. And if you're not down with that, I'm going to get the United States federal government to spend almost $2 billion to keep you from having sex until you get to that marriage. And that's going to work. I guarantee it. My name is Josh Borman.
I'm June Sternbach.
And this is Ill-Conceived, a podcast about natalism. You know, I think I was like, when we were getting started with this show, I was like, this is a very serious show.
Yeah.
And I need to be very serious. And I've sort of realized that, like, if I don't lean into it at least a little bit, it just doesn't really sound like me.
Yeah, no, I think the temptation was there, and it is a very serious show, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to the other shows that we do.
Well, we're talking about serious shit, yeah.
But a lot of the time it comes down to, it's about fucking. And it's like, it's hard to be like kind of the most serious person in the world when you talk about like weird conservative old men preventing people from fucking. Or maybe not that, but only wanting them to fuck in the confines of a marriage, you know? It's kind of goofy.
And we're back, obviously, here for another week. We didn't get a chance to put an episode out last week because we have both been hella busy. June, what have you been up to?
My co-host on Western Kabuki, Caleb, and I started anew, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. We're doing Kill the Computer now. So we've been navigating, like starting fresh, total rebrand, and just getting that show going. So it's been a really busy like week and a half or 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, Kill the Computer is a bit more like this show, I guess, right? Like you're being a bit more focused on like subject matter and like doing deep dives into specific things, and it's more of that and less of a just chatting kind of show, right?
Yeah. We always sort of had research, and we would do episodes where we would sort of talk around a lot of it. But I feel like sometimes we always felt like, hey, we have all this research, and you know, it was a hangout, talk, laugh show, and I love that. I love that so much. But in this rebrand, yeah, we're sort of leaning into actually like doing a lot more research and focusing more heavy on that. So it's been a shift for sure. But it's been a really fun one.
Yeah, what are you discovering so far?
That the internet fucking sucks. Oh my God. You know, I think there was a hesitation in 2016, the 2016 election, where everyone was like, wow, it turns out online isn't real life. And like, maybe that was true back then. Sure. Like, I think that was probably true for a while, but there was something that happened in COVID era where online really started to become real life.
Yes.
And ever since the lockdowns ended, we have like shifted into a brand new society where online and real life sort of blend in this horrifying way, especially as technology keeps advancing. And it's just really interesting and horrifying to discover every new way that seems to be true. So that's sort of what we've been doing so far. But yeah, no, so I've been doing that recently, which has been a lot. But what have you been up to? I mean, I know, but for the audience.
Yeah, well, I am in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I've been here for the past week and a half or so, directing a play. We took a show here. I'm looking at my face in the camera. It looks completely red. I'm not actually as red as I appear to be, I think, on this screen, but there is so much sun up here. It's absolutely beautiful. So Trash Future did a live show, and I got to go up on stage with them. So now I can say that I have both performed and directed at the Edinburgh Fringe. That's kind of fun.
That's kind of sick, actually.
But yeah, no, I'm doing a show called The Boy from Bantai. It is written and performed by my friend Jeremy, who's a brilliant pianist. It's about his journey as an artist, starting in the Philippines and, you know, plinking around on the piano while he watched cartoons with his brother, all the way to pursuing a degree in piano performance and going out there and then trying to figure out like how to be an artist when the first thing that he was planning on didn't turn out to be exactly what he hoped it would be. So that's the pitch of the show in a nutshell. And we've been having a lot of fun so far.
I can't wait to one day go to Broadway and see it being performed. Yeah,
that's right. The Broadway debut. We are looking forward to that.
It's a few years out, but it's going to happen. Yeah,
it's going to happen. Yeah. Well, why don't we take a look at the mailbag? Right. Let's see what we've gotten since the last time we recorded
our brand new world famous.
Yes, our world famous segment, the mailbag. Again, we need some drops. If anybody wants to compose a little, it's the mailbag. Let me know. I don't know why I sounded like fucking
Kermit the Frog
or Louis Armstrong. I don't really.
Yeah, more Louis.
Dear June and Josh, this is from Ashbury, by the way. Ashbury says, Dear June and Josh, hello and good afternoon to my favorite podcast hosts. I hope you're both doing well this weekend. It took me a while to decide whether I wanted to write this email because I didn't want to bother the two of you. Don't worry about that, Ashbury. You're definitely not bothering us. But since you invited listeners to reach out in the last episode I listened to, just wanted to express my admiration and appreciation for what you're doing with Ill Conceived and share some of my own experiences with everything you're talking about. The religious right has played a big role in my life and family. For example, my grandmother used to work for Pat Robertson at the Christian Broadcasting Network.
No way.
And according to my mother, while she was there one day, one of his employees actually tried to spank her for misbehaving. Absolutely insane. On the other side of the family, my father fell into an especially psychotic brand of evangelical Christianity. When I was 11, he had what was essentially an exorcism performed on me, which he considered a better alternative to therapy. I have lots of these stories. I bring it up because one of the big things I appreciate about your podcast is how much context and history I have learned about these things. I feel like I understand my family and my experiences with them a lot better with all this new and fascinating and sometimes horrifying information. In discussing the first episode with my mother, I learned that my father was a hardcore promise keeper. He even went to that big assembly in D.C., which admittedly wasn't a big deal since we lived in Maryland, barely 30 minutes away at the time, but still, he was there. Considering that he was a teacher, and a few years later he started serially cheating on my mother with his underage students.
No.
Eventually leading to his arrest and later him fleeing the country. Jesus Christ.
He's quite the character.
The promise keeping clearly worked really well for him.
Yeah.
Despite his failure at keeping the promises, though, I feel like I actually understand my father a whole lot better. I see now that he was absolutely a natalist, or at least operated in that sphere, that framework, and the religious right birth rate panic informed a lot of his decisions and behavior. After he found a new wife, he spent almost $20,000 on various fertility treatments, both of the legitimate kind and of the kind RFK would approve of, so his 50-year-old ass could have more children. At the time, I thought he just wanted to have a full replacement family after losing myself and my mother. And while I'm sure that was part of it, looking back now, I realized that he was motivated by both that ideological compulsion to go forth and multiply and make more children to raise more good Christians, which you two have discussed at length, as well as replacement fears that he needed to do his part to stop the scary non-whites from taking over the country. So much of his behavior makes more sense looking at it through this lens and with all this history in mind, and I probably never would have learned any of it if not for Ill Conceived. So yeah, thank you. Well, thank you, Ashbury, for writing in.
Oh, thank you. That's really that's an insane father that you have. I'm so sorry about that.
Your dad.
I'm genuinely glad that you maybe put together some context on maybe why he was as insane. Of course, not good, but at least ideologically and in his own mind, it makes sense. We haven't really talked about it on the show yet, but I want to really soon, just through the framework of Elon Musk in particular, because he's the best example, most well-known example of this kind of guy that just, he famously has 15 kids. Who knows at this point? And it isn't to replace any children. It is to create a dynasty. And some men, especially the more radical right wing that they become, seem to buy into that worldview and really the do your own or do your part really is what they believe they're doing. They do believe they're saving the future by doing that.
Got another one here from Brian, who happens to be my cousin, by the way. I recognized this name. On episode 6, you talked about population growth as being important. Otherwise, communities could end up like Detroit due to population loss. As an urban planner who has extensively studied and worked in Detroit for 25 years, I can't help but point out the gross oversimplification of this statement. Okay, so Brian is getting your ass, June. Sorry about that.
Fuck.
Metro Detroit's population has remained relatively stable since the 1960s and remains so today at around 3.5 to 4.0 million people. But what has not remained stable is the development of land. Housing has continued to sprawl outwards on farm, forest, and wetlands at 4 times the annual pace of any population growth for the past several decades. In some years, the overbuilding of housing and its accompanying strip malls and office parks on exurban land has reached 10 times the rate of the region's population growth. The reason for the large amounts of vacant land and buildings and financial stress in Detroit proper isn't a lack of population growth or low birth rates in the Detroit region. The reason these issues exist in Detroit are state policies that directly and indirectly incentivize communities that participate in suburban sprawl and are building new, and gives little consideration to the needs of legacy cities who are managing existing aging housing stocks, schools, infrastructure, etc. So just wanted to throw that in there as well, because I know we had briefly mentioned Detroit, and then when I got to the edit, I was like, oh, I wish that we had talked about this maybe just a little bit more.
Yeah, I had a little bit more about, like, specifically labor in my outline, but we were like, we can maybe touch on this a little bit later. So we sort of just briefly went over it. But no, that clarification from Brian is insanely good and useful. Thank you for that, genuinely. The greatest evil in the United States, first and foremost, is the suburban sprawl.
Yep.
Let's be honest. The suburban sprawl is fucking evil, and why everything, maybe not why, but is a very clear symptom of why everything is as bad as it is right now in most of America. Like, especially the suburban paranoia, the fenced walls, the it's like you're living in a castle, the paranoia of being alone and fearing the outside. Like, that is like a social ill.
Yeah, and I feel like, too, when these people, these natalists, right, talk about the need to have all these kids, so often the argument is about sustainability, right? It's like, we need more people in order to keep things going sustainably. But then more often than not, at least in my experience, they're the very same people who refuse to advocate for policies that would make for more sustainable living, right?
Absolutely.
More density in downtown cores, more mass transit, more things like this. I mean, I realize I'm kind of like going into territory of a slightly adjacent podcast. Listen to The War on Cars, everybody. It's a great show. But I think it's a good point that, like, in order to think about growth, any kind of growth, you have to think about how you do it sustainably. And by simply focusing on birth rates, it doesn't consider what are the other things that you need to do to continue to grow in a way that makes sense for the future. All right, this one's from Alexander from San Jose. Hey there, I've really been enjoying Ill Conceived and the first episode of Kill the Computer, and had a quick thought. First of all, Alexander, I see you didn't mention the worst of all possible worlds. Wow.
I see where his allegiances lie.
Unbelievable. No, I'm kidding. You mentioned the natalist argument that only by having tons of babies can humanity produce new geniuses, which statistically kind of tracks. On the RFK Jr. episode, it came up that a subset of natalists see neurodiverse and neurodivergent kids as non-functional, a fate practically worse than death. And it struck me, without neurodiverse people, we'd have substantially fewer quote-unquote geniuses, both anecdotally, but also, like, who thinks novelly more than people with atypical minds?
Right.
Has there ever been an effort to reconcile this contradiction within the natalist community, or just the predictable race science nonsense? And I mean, I don't have a quick and easy answer for this one, Alexander, but I think that's a great fucking point. That in general, in order to have societies where all kinds of thought and all kinds of people are allowed to flourish, you need to allow for all kinds of thinking. By the way, a few people emailed us to talk about those fucking Collins perverts. What are their names? Simone and...
The ones with the glasses, right?
The ones with the glasses. I hate them so much.
Everyone, I know them as the ones with the glasses more than by their actual name at this point, yeah.
But we've had like 5 people already email in to talk about them, so I don't know. Maybe we'll do an episode about them at some point. I just feel like they've gotten way too much exposure already. I think that those people, though, part of why they've gotten so much exposure and attention is that they are great examples of the kinds of people that natalists tend to put forward as their best and brightest, right?
The intellectual natalist, yeah.
Exactly. And the kinds of people that they're hoping to develop are people who fit within a certain conception of what brilliance looks like. They're trying to make brilliant kids, and that brilliance exists within a very narrow framework of what brilliance ought to look like.
And that family, those people, is definitely, I don't want to say at odds, but they're not like the type of healthy kid, large family that like the type of natalist that RFK Jr. is. They're like in a totally different ideological sphere. And I would actually be curious. I don't know how much RFK Jr. and Elon Musk have talked. I don't like, I would, because Elon Musk famously is very neurodivergent, of course. He does. I mean, he said himself he has, I think he said Asperger's. He might have said that. I don't think that's like the technical term anymore, but he has autism. I think that's fairly obvious. And I feel like RFK Jr., the problem with a lot of these people is they're not very consistent. Like in practice, with their ideology, like he probably loves Elon Musk, even though he probably thinks that autism is a problem. It's a very selective sort of thing, but it's definitely like a thing that we should explore a full episode on, because I feel like it's that is a really dense like comparison like that because it is two competing types of right-wing natalist. It's like the inter ideological war at the moment, I feel like.
The other thing I would say is that I think that genius, as it is often understood by Americans, at least, is more often to do with your ability to marshal the forces of labor and capital than is to do with actual intellectual heft, right?
Yeah.
Because to use Elon Musk as a pretty good example, and I think Henry Ford before him, frankly, I don't think that these guys are particularly bright as regards like having original ideas.
Right. Yeah.
But the thing that they are very good at is building these massive, massive machines which can manufacture a tremendous amount of shit, and it's whatever they want to build, right?
And that's really what, like when I mentioned that in the Lyman Stone episode, that is what I feel like a lot of these people do mean when they mean genius. Like basically the most successful capitalists, people that can generate money, is what they do mean. Yeah.
So again, Alexander from San Jose, thank you for the question. And now let's close the mailbag and start the show. Today's episode is about abstinence-only sex education, which is a classic form of sex education. It's one where you teach kids that the only good way to not get any sort of sexually transmitted diseases, to not get pregnant, all of that is by not having sex. And like, yeah, correct. Obviously. Duh.
Which, yeah, no, very true. But do we know people? Humans are tempted by many things. And, sex, one of the most primal desires. I think, I feel like people might ignore that. Like, I think people might just straight up not listen to that sort of thing. But
I'm sorry, you're telling me that teenagers are horny? What?
Yeah. And teenagers are rebellious. And,
unbelievable.
Doesn't work for everyone, but it seemed like people thought for a while this really was going to solve everything, like just abstinence only.
That's been the hope. And this is one of those things where I'm digging into something that is a big part of my own upbringing. Because as we previously discussed, I grew up in an evangelical Christian world and actually even went to a Christian school. And this was the sex education that I received.
Actually, I did as well. I went to a Catholic school for a while, and I did also receive abstinence-only education.
So before we dig into sort of the history of how the federal government has taken abstinence-only sex education and prioritized it, June, what do you remember about sex ed from when you were a kid?
I kind of received two different versions of it. The first version was the abstinence-only sex education. That was in middle school. I went to a Catholic school, and I do believe that the health teacher at the time probably could have taught anything, because it was a pretty relaxed Catholic school. They taught us about like evolution and history for more than 6,000 years. So they were like kind of in the real world about other topics, but I do know this health teacher was a very, very right-wing, very Catholic, like true believer Catholic woman. So she gave us the like, oh, don't do this. Like you have to wait for marriage. It's about marriage. You have to honor God and his wishes. You have to do this and that. And you can't do this and that because you will be punished, sort of thing. But then eventually when I got to high school, I went to a public high school. I ended up for the health class there, of course, they ended up teaching us about like childbirth and like all of that sort of thing. And they didn't really do abstinence-only education at that point. So I sort of got the two sides of the coin here in terms of like mainstream ways to teach children about sex.
Yeah, for me, it was in, I want to say 4th grade. That was sort of the preliminary sex ed. I distinctly remember that they actually split the class up and the boys went off in one place and the girls went off in the other.
Wait, that happened to me too. Oh my!
Oh, yeah?
Memory unlocked. Holy fuck! Yeah, that happened to me too. Sorry to interrupt. That was just a brain blast moment.
No, that's all right. And I don't specifically remember too much what it was that we learned at that time. I think it was just more, I was just more interested by the fact that we were getting split up. I remember less what I learned, and I remember more just being curious about what the girls were learning, because I was like, but this isn't fair. Like, they're getting extra information that I'm not getting. What the fuck? This doesn't seem right. I'm assuming, right, that they were getting the secret information about, like, you're going to have a period and, blah, 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 blah. And, we're learning about boners, I think. Again, I don't really remember. What I do remember was that once we got to 8th grade, that was the point at which the rubber started hitting the road. But the rubbers were not a thing that we learned about because it was abstinence-only sex education, baby. It was, there is only one way to prevent pregnancy, and it is by not having sex. And this was what I also remember was the distinct emotional manipulation component of it. So I remember this woman came in, and if I recall correctly, she was actually connected to the local crisis pregnancy center, which is another thing that we're going to need to talk about at some point.
Absolutely.
Crisis pregnancy centers are sort of like places that young pregnant mothers will go to thinking that they're going to get sort of the full range of options. And they're basically like, don't have an abortion. Don't do it. Don't do it. You need to keep your baby. Here, have an ultrasound. We're going to guilt you into keeping the pregnancy, right?
Yeah, I think we talked a little about that in the IVF episode, because that is like a method that they use a lot in these like religious communities. Yeah.
And the guilt was there for the sex ed piece of things too, where she had these construction paper hearts, and then like she would put glue on the hearts and then stick the hearts to each other and then let the glue set and then tear the hearts apart and show that like this is what happens when you have sex, is a piece of your heart is going to stay attached to that other person's heart, and that's bad.
No way.
You will be forever. You will no longer be pure for your future husband or your future wife. And there was actually quite a bit less emphasis on the mechanics of sex and like why it is that STIs exist and like what they will do to you. It wasn't scaring us in that way. No, it was scaring us in your emotions are going to be fucked up forever. And also you might have an unexpected child that you're not going to be able to take care of. Mm-hmm. And that was the other piece, was we had like the little like babies that you had to carry around with you, for a couple days to be like, this is what it would be like if you had to have an actual baby. And in what I think is a very interesting tell also for sort of where this program was normally being deployed, most of the baby dolls were black.
Interesting little connection there to the racism involved in a lot of this. Yeah.
They were mostly furnishing this program to the inner city schools in Grand Rapids, which were predominantly black. And those kids were the ones getting also the brunt of this abstinence-only sex education.
It is really interesting that, because I don't think they really mentioned sex in my abstinence-only education either, but it really is about talking about how you are a tainted human being. I
love that they didn't really talk about sex during sex education.
Yeah, because that's not really what this is about. This is about fear. It's about inducing fear into people, about religious fear more than anything.
That's exactly right. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. Today's subject, federal funding of abstinence-only sex education, and seeing the way that the United States government has sort of used this as a priority every time a Republican administration comes in, and in one particular case, the Clinton administration, quite a bit on the Democrat side as well. So, to start with policy on this matter, we have to go back to 1981. That was the enactment of something called the Adolescent Family Life Act. This was a law that got amended into the Public Health Service Act. That's basically the law that's been around since 1944. It was originally enacted to promote public health and basically established institutions that still exist today, like the Centers for Disease Control and the NIH, stuff like that, right? And I just wanted to point this up right now, first thing, because when we talk about the way that these programs are funded, these sex education programs, they're not going through education channels of the U.S. government, right? Because the Department of Education wouldn't be established for a little while. And even now, with, the U.S. Department of Education being dismantled under Trump, some of these programs of public health still remain around. This is where the funding goes through. It actually gets administered through Social Security, interestingly. Anyway, this was co-sponsored by Jeremiah Denton, which he was a senator from Alabama, and Orrin Hatch, the longtime senator from Utah. And the big concern here in the early 80s was that too much federal money was going toward Planned Parenthood, the organization that is like one of the biggest boogeymen on the right. Their concern was that, oh no, adolescents, when it comes to having sex, they're thinking contraception first rather than marriage first.
Which, okay, on the face, a very rational person would be like, all right, well, at least they're being safe.
Yeah.
But no, that's not being safe to the Christian right. That is destroying your soul. That is leaving a piece of your heart behind.
Well, and as I'm going to end up arguing in this episode, I don't think they actually care about these kids getting married at all. And I don't think that they care about them using contraception at all. I think they just want them to have more babies. But we'll get there.
Yeah. A wild theory on the show about natalism.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So I've got a quote here, and this is from Rebecca Saul in the Guttmacher Report. Guttmacher is sort of the institute that tracks abortion policy in the United States. As mandated by the law and in line with the intent of its conservative sponsors, AFLA's early grants went almost exclusively to far-right and religious groups. Much of the funding was used to develop the first generation of so-called fear-based curricula, such as sex respect, which rely on scare tactics to promote abstinence and often distort information relating to the effectiveness of contraceptive and disease prevention methods. So again, that's more of the stuff that you were talking about, right? Like scare kids, yeah? And that's the model that is most often put forth by these approaches.
I just love that they call it sex respect. Like they always put they try to put a positive spin. It's like, oh, it's about love. But then they're like, oh, but you might be going to hell actually. And like also contraception is evil. Like all this stuff is really evil. Sex respect.
You got to respect that sex. And now I should note that for AFLA, the amount allocated by the federal government, very small. We're talking $4 million nationally per year. Really infinitesimal amounts of money when you look at the scale of the national budget or even any state budget, honestly. This is about enhancing a handful of trusted associates with a bit of money and then allowing them then to provide a framework which they can use to pilot and develop messaging. Because the messaging, that fear-based messaging that we talked about that they were developing with these programs, as Rebecca Saul notes, that would get used later on. And in terms of the administration that would then take this federal funding of sex education and expand it further, it wasn't the Bush administration, which you might expect, the first Bush administration. It was, in fact, a man named William Jefferson Clinton.
Everyone's favorite saxophone player, world's sexiest man for a while.
That's right. Everyone's favorite Jeffrey Epstein associate, Bill Clinton, elected president in 1992. Now, he appointed a woman named Joycelyn Elders to be his Surgeon General in 1993. June, have you ever heard of Joycelyn Elders?
I have not before today, no.
Okay. Joycelyn Elders is one of those people who you'll probably remember if you were politically aware in the early 90s.
Yeah, I was barely a thought at that point, so I wasn't around yet for that one.
But now you're a full-grown thought.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
That hoe over there? Anybody? But like, she was such a fucking lightning rod for conservatives. Mm. In fact, I found this clip of Rush Limbaugh, and he's just making fun of her.
If we want to solve problems like we had in the Long Island Railroad massacre, there's a way. Do you people wait till you see this? This is such brilliance. Joycelyn Elders, Surgeon General. Here is the way to solve that problem. Watch.
We can decide that we've got to keep the guns out of the hands of our children. We can make safer weapons. We can make safer bullets. We can educate our parents on how to deal with their children. And we can continue to work and make, like we made car license, we can require license in order to carry a gun.
So there you have it. Safer guns, safer bullets.
And I think this clip is a pretty decent example of the way that people would treat Joycelyn Elders, where first of all, she's a black woman. And secondly, she has sort of a distinctive manner of speaking. And she has a sort of unified view of public health that sees things like guns as a threat to the public health, but sometimes she would say things where her intention was very, very clear, but it could be weaponized in bad faith to be like, look at this fucking idiot who doesn't know what she's talking about, which of course people like Rush Limbaugh love to do because they're terrible people, and there's nothing they love to do more than make fun of black women. And it's interesting to go and listen to interviews with Joycelyn Elders from that are more recent, relative to in the 90s, because she was a very brash person who would not hesitate to speak her mind a lot of the time. But then what would happen is, because she was essentially a politician, once she got appointed Surgeon General, people would take what she was saying, they would represent it and weaponize it in bad faith, and then she would become very cagey, and it would sound like she was being evasive.
Like, I knew this about like Rush Limbaugh, especially in these days, but it's crazy that they've always just sort of had the same method of like homing in on like a specific type of crazy liberal to like always like poke fun at and poke holes into. It's the same exact strategy today.
Well, and in that clip where she's talking about guns, right? It's so clear what she means.
Of course,
it means that there's too many guns, and this is a public health crisis. We need to do something to stop this, and it's going to involve putting trigger locks and safeties on guns and prioritizing probably the use of non-lethal ammunition. And then Rush Limbaugh over here being like, safer guns, safer bullets, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, they'll say that, and they'll be like, yeah, we got this thing called clean coal now. It's like, come on.
Exactly.
What are we even talking about here?
But the real reason that conservatives hated her so much, the real political reason, I should say, the agenda reason, is that her approach to public health is in direct opposition to the approach that we talked about with like focus on the family. Because the conservative conception of a family is that the parents are the ones who are in charge of the children. The children have essentially no agency because they are incapable of agency, essentially, in that what the parent wants for the child is the only thing that should dictate the course of that child's life up until that child becomes an independent adult, which is, I guess, when they leave the house, right?
And even still to this day, you can see that manifest with how the right talks about like trans kids, where they think like, no, you can't, like, don't even let them know about being trans because that'll like corrupt their mind. And it's like, well, I guess you would probably believe that if you think the parent should be the ultimate authority of like a 17-year-old. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's a person with like at least enough know-how at that point to like understand themselves in that way, Well,
and to that point as well about being like, I don't know, I'm trans, right? And maybe I grow up in somewhere in the country where my parents are pressured to think that trans people are an abomination, or like I realize that I'm gay, something like that, something that goes against the desires of my parents. I don't know. I get pregnant, right? And it's an unexpected, unplanned pregnancy. And I don't want to carry the child to term, obviously, right?
Right.
These are all situations where a minor might end up being in direct opposition with the will of their parents. And the state has to make a decision to either empower the minor in that case or disempower them because of what their parents want them to do. And Joycelyn Elders, from the very fucking beginning, because she had such a long career in medicine and she saw so many young women, especially young black women, with unplanned pregnancies, which oftentimes came through truly horrific means, right? She developed this strong burning passion for making sure that everybody could have access to the family planning and contraception and abortion needs that they wanted.
Our largest school was Central High School, where we had we offered contraceptives and everything. And we went from over 40 pregnancies per year down to 3.
Oh.
And that stayed until about 3 or 4 years ago, when the school-based clinic was closed. They said they couldn't afford it and all this. Well, now they're back up to 46 pregnancies in the school this past year. And one low birth weight baby will cost more than 10 school-based clinics.
And low birth rate because of the age of the mother?
Because of, one low birth weight baby born to a teenage mother. Low birth weight may be born to any mother, but they're far more likely to be, the incidence is higher among teenagers than older women. And first of all, they won't get prenatal care. Secondly, they and they feel that they aren't pregnant until the doctor says I'm pregnant, and as long as you don't go to the doctor and the doctor didn't say you were pregnant, you're not pregnant.
And what is I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Elders.
No, and I just think that if we could get more teenagers even into early prenatal care, we would reduce the incidence of low birth weight babies.
And what is the youngest mother you've seen?
The youngest mother that I personally have seen and taken care of was 8 years old. And she had twins.
Oh my fucking God. Horrible. What the fuck?
So if you've experienced this kind of thing, it stands to reason that you're going to be that all this stuff about like, oh, well, the family, right? Like the parents need to have blah, 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 blah. It's like, that's not going to fucking wash, because in a lot of these extremely abusive cases, it's the family members who are abusing these kids, and that's leading to pregnancies. These are things that any public health policy needs to account for. And to say the least, abstinence-only sex education doesn't guard against this kind of situation.
No, and I would argue especially makes it worse, because if you're told like, oh, sex is this really awful, scary thing unless you're married and you shouldn't do this otherwise, and that like you will be judged if you do this sort of thing. And if someone gets pregnant through sex when they're not married and underaged, why would they trust anyone in their life that they should trust to talk about this issue? They're not going to be able to communicate that because of this program to their parents, to anyone, really.
To extend that even further, like if you're a kid who, let's say that you were abused when you were a kid, and now you're hearing all of this messaging that like sex is this incredible, wonderful thing that you need to wait for, and then once and only once you're going to find your fantastic lifelong partner and you're going to have that first sex and it's going to be amazing, and aren't you glad you waited? What if you weren't given the choice to wait?
It really is just like mind terrorism. It really weighs on people, the way that this narrative, they want to build these narratives about sex and how it's perceived among society, and it's all for the worst.
So to bring it back to Elders, right, in late 1994, she appeared at a New York event commemorating World AIDS Day. This was directly following the November 1994 midterms, the so-called Republican Revolution that saw the Republicans sweep back into power and gain both the House and the Senate, basically making Newt Gingrich the most powerful man in America.
Awful.
And per the LA Times, this is from December 10, 1994, and I quote, Amid a discussion of AIDS prevention, she was asked by an audience member about the prospects that masturbation could be more openly discussed and promoted as a means of keeping young people from riskier sexual activity. I think it is something that's part of human sexuality, and it's part of something that perhaps should be taught, she said. But we've not even taught our children the very basics, and I feel that we have tried ignorance for a very long time, and it's time we try education.
She sounds like the most reasonable person in the world. Like, hey, kids are very new to the world. They don't know a lot. We should let them know about things. And everyone was like, boo, you suck. Fuck you.
And they immediately, right, the entire Christian right dog piled on her. And the thing that they were saying was, Joycelyn Elders wants to go into your kindergartner's classroom and teach them how to masturbate. Which, like, come on, man.
That's insane. And that it's crazy to me that these narratives are still, they're just recanned today. It's the same things that they're saying, like, oh, you want to have, and it's about the same topic, which we'll get to in the next episode about, like, the state of sex education in the United States today. But where there's, like, a book about sex education, and people like Chaya Raichek, Libs of TikTok, will see that and be like, oh, they're trying to corrupt your kids. They're trying to do this, and that. And it's like, no, we're just trying to educate kids at school. Like, that's just what this is.
Like, have you ever spent any amount of time around, like, 7-year-old boys? They are always sticking their hands down their pants. Like, you have to tell them to stop, because otherwise they will not stop.
Yeah. No, kids just don't know anything.
And again, it's like, it's that thing of, okay, what do you want to tell these kids, right? Because they're going to be doing this stuff either way, because it's something that is going to feel good, right? So do you tell them, hey, you have a body part that feels, that feels nice when you touch it, and the reason is that when you get older, blah, 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 right?
Right.
That's one thing you can do. Or you can just be like, don't fucking do that, ever.
Yeah.
And then lead them on the road to a life of shame.
Which is not good.
I know which one I would rather have heard as a kid, and I know which one I did hear as a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think especially as people get older, they people that were taught, and not just in this case specifically, but in any case that they had any sort of built-in shame, either just through societal means or familial or just however you grow up, it's really hard for people to unlearn that shame. And that typically always needs to happen for someone to feel fulfilled and like complete, I guess. It's not learning shame of any sort about being alive is not a good thing.
Well, in one of the articles that I found when I was researching this episode was about, like, attitudes towards sex and whether you had waited or not, right? Whether you had waited until marriage or, like all of these different things. And it turns out, and this probably sounds unsurprising, that the people who have the best feeling of their own sexuality are the people who feel like they were the most in control of their own sexuality. So that when they were having sex, they were doing it because they wanted to do it, when they wanted to do it. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether you waited until you fucking got married or whatever. It's just, did you feel like it was the thing you wanted to be doing? And if it was, turns out you feel pretty good about having sex. If not, you have problems about it. Huh, weird. Anyway, back to Elders for a second. After those remarks, the Clinton administration shit-canned her immediately.
Oh, my God.
She had said a number of other things. She had said that conservatives have, and I quote, a love affair with the fetus, which I'm sorry, that's just fucking true. She was spitting with that one.
Wait, that goes hard. I kind of love this person. I'm really sad that Clinton canned her. He succumbed to the pressure of
she's still alive.
Rush Limbaugh.
She's still alive. She's like 92. And it's crazy. Wow. She's still got pretty much all her marbles too. There was like a video interview that somebody did with her last year. I'll link it down in the notes. She also advocated for legalization of recreational drugs.
Oh my God. She's kind of, dare I say, based.
She's a little goated. But yeah, she was gone. And now the Republicans were in control. And Clinton immediately pivoted to being the reasonable Democrat and working together with the Republicans to pass the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation of 1996. If you ever hear of Clinton's welfare reform bill, this is what they're talking about. This was, I would say, probably the signature policy achievement of the Clinton era. at least in terms of domestic policy. It added work requirements to welfare.
Dog shit.
Defunded quite a bit of existing entitlements, and also ceded the entire framing on the idea of welfare to the right. And we're in the pickle that we're in now in no small part because of Clinton welfare reform.
That's crazy. So was it just that right-wingers, especially people like Rush Limbaugh at the time, because he was like the voice, I feel like, of conservatism at that point. Was it just that they were pounding away day after day after day after day after day on like not just her, but this whole conversation? Was this sort of like the national moral panic of the time?
Yeah, well, it was that, right? Because they did have this incredible platform, and you also, of course, had guys like James Dobson on the religious side of it. Right. But it was also just that the Republicans had control of the House and the Senate.
Right.
And Newt Gingrich, in particular, being Speaker of the House, was very good at his job. And in general, Republicans are very good at using whatever offices they have to advance policy objectives. And Clinton, because he was afraid of being perceived as recalcitrant or out of touch or insufficiently cooperative.
Average Democratic politician mindset.
Exactly. He sought to work together with them, and he did. One of the things that was included in this welfare reform bill was $250 million of federal money allocated over the course of 5 years, so about $50 million a year, to promote abstinence-only sex education.
Oh, way.
So this is basically an expansion of what had already been started with AFLA.
So like over 10 times per year expansion.
Yeah. And again, not a huge amount of money in the scope of the overall federal budget or state budget, but a decent little chunk of change, right?
And I mean, let's be real. What this education is there's not like props. There's not like they're not like building new things. It's just like a conversation. It's like maybe just hiring a couple of new people per school about like to maybe talk as the new health teacher, or just it's like very small things. So you don't really need like a massive budget. This is enough to get the job done.
Yeah, and the way that this money would work basically is it would get granted out in block grants to states and allocated based on how large the state was. So the state of California got the most funding under this. Later on, actually, the state of California would start to not accept those funds anymore, which is kind of interesting. If you're not an American, I can't do a full explainer on the system of American federalism in 2 minutes, but the bottom line is that there are some things that are pretty much the exclusive domain of the states to control. Education is one of those things, but the federal government can provide additional funding to do stuff. And this is one of those things. And so these education funds weren't just to schools, it was also to like community organizations and stuff like that. And the recipients of these block grants could then use these monies to educate people, but they had to fulfill all of the following criteria.
Oh, no. Okay.
And I've got the language here, right from the bill. Education on sexual risk avoidance pursuant to an allotment under this section shall A. Ensure that the unambiguous and primary emphasis and context for each topic described is a message to youth that normalizes the optimal health behavior of avoiding non-marital sexual activity.
There it is.
B. Be medically accurate and complete. That's fucking bullshit, by the way, B. B is not at all something that they consider. C. Be age appropriate. D. Be based on adolescent learning and developmental theories for the age group receiving the education. And E. Be culturally appropriate, recognizing the experiences of youth from diverse communities, backgrounds, and experiences. So that's the framework, right? Topics. Education on sexual risk avoidance pursuant to an allotment under this section shall address each of the following topics. A. The holistic individual and societal benefits associated with personal responsibility. God, we love personal responsibility, don't we? Self-regulation, goal setting, healthy decision-making, and a focus on the future.
Oh, God. I threw up multiple times every single word that you read there. Oh, my God.
B, the advantage of refraining from non-marital sexual activity in order to improve the future prospects and physical and emotional health of youth. C, the increased likelihood of avoiding poverty when youth attain self-sufficiency and emotional maturity before engaging in sexual activity. D, the foundational components of healthy relationships, which I just think is so interesting. Healthy relationships, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? And their impact on the formation of healthy marriages and safe and stable families. You gotta focus on the family. E, how other youth risk behaviors, such as drug and alcohol usage, increase the risk for teen sex. And F, how to resist and avoid and receive help regarding sexual coercion and dating violence, recognizing that even with consent, teen sex remains a youth risk behavior. And that makes me so fucking angry there. The conflation of consensual teen sex with sexual coercion and dating violence.
Yeah.
Those are two completely different things, and they're conflated into the same bullet there, which really gives you a sense of the ideology backing this law.
It's really disturbing to me that a bill like this framework was the guiding principle of public education in the United States for a while, where this was like a pretty fucking big win for like the conservative right. Like they really just sort of strong-armed, and like, of course, I'm not trying to say Bill Clinton is not to blame. He fired Joycelyn Elders, so he was like giving into this, and then of course the Republicans took over the House and the Senate. But I just cannot believe a Democratic president allowed this framework to just be what everyone was taught in this country.
Well, to be clear, not everyone, right? Again, these are federal guidelines for matching federal block grants that would go to states.
Right.
Every state does sex ed differently. And some states actually don't require it at all, which is kind of interesting. But what this does do is it creates an incentive structure for how states build their sex education programs. Right.
Which, when you're given money, like the average person, if they're like, hey, do you want like $1 million? All you have to do is be medically accurate and complete. And like a few other things. And of course, some like especially poor communities will probably be like, yes, that $1 million is going to let us give our students pencils and pens. You know, that was like probably the trade-off at the time for a lot of these communities. Like that money from the federal government would help a lot.
This is the thing that I think Republicans are really good at that Democrats don't understand, which is that, you know, they will talk all day until the cows come home about like how horrible big government is, right? The federal government and how, you know, blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to creating incentive structures using federal money, they can't fucking get enough of it.
Yeah.
Whether it's promising funding if you fulfill certain requirements or withholding funding if you don't meet certain requirements.
That's been the long-time Republican strategy, and we see that amplified so much more in the years of Donald Trump. I mean, we just saw this play out recently with Harvard and a couple of other colleges where he was like, we're going to withhold public funding unless you let us basically bring ICE on campus and like start to punish pro-Palestine student organizations.
Right.
This is how they get what they want across the entire country.
So this provides, like I said, a framework that can be built upon, and build upon it is exactly what they did. Because in the year 2000, with Bush as president, Congress establishes something called the Community-Based Abstinence Education Program.
Oh, God.
And this allocates even more federal funding. And it goes to providers who exclusively promote abstinence until marriage. And again, most of this money is going to organizations like crisis pregnancy centers. And so this is the other thing, too, that I should note, right? Like, you said the thing about like this money going to schools to help them buy pencils or whatever. For the most part, that's actually probably not what's happening with this money.
Oh, my God.
What's probably happening with this money is that it's going toward the weirdest guy you've ever met who has this organization called like Stand Up for Virginity. And then he has like a van that drives around to teach teenagers how to stand up for virginity. And I'm not even joking.
No.
That's how this works. That's where that money is going. I mean, some of it is probably going to school districts, but big chunks of this money are going to community organizations run by the weirdest fucking people in the world.
No, I mean, that's so true. And of course, this isn't necessarily the same, but like in these times in like the 2000s and like late 90s, I feel like organizations, I feel like DARE, the drug organization DARE, is just like the perfect example of this sort of guy and
yes.
thing where like these were like outside a community program brought into schools to teach about a specific agenda piece. And like that was just huge during these times.
Did you ever have somebody from the NRA come into your school to teach you about gun safety?
So thankfully, like I said earlier in this episode, I had like a pretty reasonable Catholic school. We never had NRA as far as I can remember. We did have DARE, and the DARE officer was named Officer Friendly, and that was just always very strange to me. But no, never NRA.
We got the NRA videotape. So the NRA made a videotape about gun safety featuring a cartoon character named Eddie the Eagle. And Eddie the Eagle's tips for gun safety were...
Stop! Don't touch! I'm Eddie Eagle, and I like you too much to see you get hurt, and that's why I say, if you spot a gun, just walk away! Go find an adult, go tell him what you found. Guns shouldn't be left lying around. Yeah, stop! Don't touch! Leave the area, tell an adult. Do it with me now, stop! Don't touch! Leave the area, tell an adult!
Wait, I did get this. Wait, fuck. No, that's NRA. That's the NRA.
That's the National Rifle Association.
What the fuck are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I didn't know that. I absolutely did get that. Oh, no. Oh, my God. I got NRA education.
That's right.
Fuck.
God, this country is so fucking cool.
Oh, what I will say, the U.S. is really good at propaganda making it not feel like propaganda. This is astonishing. I've had like 2 brain blast moments this episode so far where it's just like complete memory unlocked with full understanding of what that was about.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe if we're lucky, we'll get a third. We'll see. So now that we've looked at how federal funding of these programs has worked, as well as why these programs get funded, like what's going on there ideologically, there's one very important question that you might be asking, which is, does this shit work?
Can I take a quick guess? Maybe an inference from our conversation so far?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't think they work. I don't think it actually makes kids safer with sex, and I don't think it actually prevents pregnancies, is my guess.
The answer to this question, does this shit work, is it depends on what you mean by work. And it also depends on what data you're looking at. So I did a pretty broad survey of the available peer-reviewed data. I went through a lot of papers that were published over the course of the past couple decades, spent a lot of time plumbing around Google Scholar and things like that. And generally speaking, the data that is sort of the best seems to indicate that there is fairly little correlation between participating in one of these programs and having it alter your sexual behavior in a meaningful way. However, there's other data that indicates that abstinence-only sex education can achieve some objectives, but that it's not nearly as effective as options that also include information about contraception.
I mean, I'm not too surprised by that at all, because I feel like any program, and maybe this is just with hindsight, of course, now that we know these days, but any program like DARE, that, like I mentioned before, just telling people to not do things because it's bad doesn't typically make people not do things.
Right.
Saying, no, don't do that doesn't actually have any meaningful, statistically significant action.
Yeah, exactly. When I heard "stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell an adult," what I did the first time I found a gun, every time I found a gun from then on out, was I picked that shit up and I shot it in the air.
As you should. That's what Americans should be doing.
As is my God-given American right.
I'm surprised NRA didn't teach kids to do that.
I know, right?
That's what they should have been doing.
So anyway, June, I want you to take a look at this graph. Every time I do, it makes me laugh. So this graph comes from a 2007 report that was published by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that took a look at 4 abstinence-only sex education programs that received federal funding through the community-based abstinence education program. And these are 4 side-by-side graphs, so bars, I should say. 4 side-by-side sets of bars. Each bar is the percentage of students who did a particular behavior. The blue bar is the percentage of students who did the behavior who were in the Abstinence-Only Sex Education program.
Oh, this is
the
amazing.
White bar
this graph is
the percentage
amazing.
of students who did not do the program who engaged in that kind of behavior. And June, I'm wondering what you notice about this graph.
I'm noticing that it doesn't fucking matter. Nothing changes. If you had abstinent programs, it was the same. It's the same. There's only a 1% difference in one of the 4 bars. I first saw this and I was like, what's going on here? But they're the same. They're the same bars.
June, they're
the
not
same.
June,
they're the same.
I will have you know that of the students who participated in the Abstinence-Only Sex Education program, 56% of those students remained abstinent, whereas in the control group, only 55% of them remained abstinent.
Goddamn, a 1% increase. That's fucking awesome, dude. I'm glad we spent $500 trillion on this program. Oh my God. We got to do $100 trillion more investment in this. We could get another percent. It could be 57 to 55.
We could get
Holy
one more
shit.
percent.
Yeah.
So of all of the surveys that I saw, this one definitely had the most rigorous methodology. It was also conducted entirely by an external organization, an external auditor, and it was published in a peer-reviewed journal. Whereas a lot of the reports on this stuff are self-reported and sometimes are peer-reviewed, but in a lot of cases not. This was one where the U.S. government wanted to see if its money was actually being put to good use. And based on this graph, I would argue that the answer is no.
I love the idea that they got all this data together and they were just like, that's weird. Where'd all that money go? What did we do with all that money?
Now, I also found another study, and this was from the Journal of Adolescent Health in 2012, a study called Consequences of Sex Education on Teen and Young Adult Sexual Behaviors and Outcomes. And the results of this study were a bit more mixed, and this was a study of studies, basically. They found that any sex education at all, whether it's abstinence only or more comprehensive, does lead to having first sex later than if you didn't get any sex education.
Oh, interesting.
So from what they found, having some form of education, even if it's abstinence only, is better than nothing at all.
I mean, that makes sense because at least you're still telling people about it. It's like at least making you aware, right. Which, I mean, that makes sense, I suppose.
But notably, there were some differences as well. One thing is that you're significantly more likely to actually use contraception, be it a condom or something else, if you get education about birth control as well as abstinence. Whereas if you just get abstinence only, you're not as likely to use contraception, which again, makes sense. The survey also found that you're less likely to have an age discrepant partner if you get education about birth control, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I wonder, I'm not going to be able to figure this out right now, but I wonder like what that correlation is. Like, I wonder why that's like what it causes directly, like most directly. That's
I don't know if that is a causative thing or not. Like, but yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, I would say that generally speaking, these programs that also include information about contraception tend to emphasize the agency of the person and saying like the reason that you should wait to have sex is not because failing to wait for sex is going to make you dirty or whatever. It's because it's your body and doing what you want with your body is important. Meaning, if some like older, and I'm assuming that generally speaking, these are older males with younger females, right?
Yeah, of course.
And it's like, well, if you're 14 and your creepy 19-year-old boyfriend wants to have sex, you can say no.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Consent is a huge thing, and like teaching people about consent is. I think that's a very empowering thing. That right. Probably is what it is. Actually, is teaching people about power dynamics, consent, and just like how like to I don't know, maybe it's not how to avoid that, but just the awareness of that just makes people way more well-rounded and able to stand up for themselves. Yeah,
because it's education. It's teaching you like what you can do. Yeah.
That's crazy. Oh my God.
I also just wanted to read this quote here from the article. It says, "The significant socio-demographic differentials in the receipt of sex education before first sex are troubling. Nearly 1/3 of young men of color did not receive instruction on either abstinence or birth control methods before first sex. Among both male and female respondents, receipt of both was less likely among those who were from a lower income group, had lower maternal education, or were Black and Hispanic. These demographic groups have poorer sexual reproductive health outcomes, including higher rates of STIs and teen pregnancy, highlighting the unmet need for formal instruction in sex education. And again, if you know anything about America, none of this should be a surprise.
Yeah, this is the eternal battle of underfunded, poor communities and just not getting the education that they need, and that being exacerbated by, of course, the Republicans and just like school choice and private education and all of these sort of things.
Okay, but what if we had federal block grants to go to a guy who drives around in a Virgin van and tells these kids that they need to save it until marriage? I feel like that could fix everything.
Maybe bring an officer friendly too. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
The last study that I wanted to talk about was from the American Journal of Public Health. This was published in 2019. It's called Funding for Abstinence-Only Education and Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention. Does State Ideology Affect Outcomes? And this one I thought was fascinating because most of these studies just sort of take a look at the broad landscape. What this study did, though, was they controlled for state ideology, and they said, okay, if there's a federally funded abstinence-only sex education program in a state like, say, Alabama, which is very conservative, is that messaging received differently there? Do they have different outcomes than a state like, say, New York, right?
Right.
And they found federal abstinence-only sex education funding does not seem to have a particularly strong effect on adolescent birth rates overall, but it does increase adolescent birth rates in conservative states.
That's wild. And I feel like I'm not too surprised by that because it goes back to the shame thing that we were talking about before, because the abstinence only education doesn't provide people with like actual ways to prevent pregnancy, which and then if you're told it's a shameful thing to do this, you're not going to tell people, you're not going to be able to talk about it. And ultimately, I mean, I think you alluded to this pretty early on in the episode that this is like ultimately what a lot of the people that endorse this program want. They do, like they don't want to say it. They'll never say they want or like teen pregnancies or the youngest possible age for being pregnant,
right?
But they don't mind it. They're not like opposed to it. That's why we've seen, especially in recent years, which we're going to explore soon in the next episode next week, teen pregnancy has cratered. It's gone so much lower than it was just decades ago. And there's people in the government right now under Donald Trump that seem to have an issue with the fact that teen pregnancies have been on the decline.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this, I'm assuming, in our next episode, that a lot of that is on the strength of choices made by the Obama administration, where they rolled back a lot of this stuff that the government had been doing before in favor of more comprehensive sex education.
For all the critiques that Obama rightfully gets, that's, I would argue, probably one of his greatest successes of his presidency is leaving behind the abstinence-only sex education programs.
Now, I did want to note about that effect on adolescent birth rates in conservative states. It's not super duper strong. Basically, the trend that they found was that for every dollar per pupil that is spent on abstinence-only sex education, a conservative state's birth rate increases by 0.3 per 1,000. So for every 1,000 students, you're getting another 0.3 babies.
And this is with the abstinence-only education.
Right. And but again, that is for every dollar spent per pupil, right? So this effect does scale the more money that you are allocating to abstinence-only sex education. And I quote here again directly from the paper, in 2008, they say, we estimate that the change in the birth rate from this single year of abstinence funding amounted to a change in the birth rate of 1.08 per 1,000 or 1,080 additional births to adolescents than would otherwise have been the case. Because again, this is getting some funding, but it's not a ton of funding. If you were to scale this funding up, there is a possibility that you could end up having more babies. And here's the thing that's really a kicker, right? This is crazy. Talking about how much these people hate evidence-based adolescent pregnancy prevention programs, right? Like the ones where it's like, here's contraceptives that you can use. Here's why getting pregnant when you're a teenager is not going to be a fun time. And here's ways to make sure that that doesn't happen to you practically and concretely, rather than just saying don't have sex. All right, so check this stat out. Evidence-based adolescent pregnancy prevention was associated with an effect of negative 2.34 adolescent births per 1,000 per dollar spent in conservative states. And like this when I saw that stat, I was like, okay, the first stat about like promoting pregnancy, like I get that's not quite enough to really make my eyes pop out of my skull, like 0.3 per 1,000, but negative 2.3 adolescent births per dollar per 1,000. That's crazy.
Significant. That's very significant.
And so when you think about these being the options, and when you think about conservatives who want more babies, of course they're not going to want to fund the option that involves negative birth rates from this sex education.
No, they'll never want
even among
to
adolescents.
do that.
They want the teenagers to have the babies.
They do, and again, like I said, they'll never say it, but they don't mind it. They don't want to provide anything for those families. They don't want to give any assistance. Of course, they would never do anything like that, and they certainly don't want to educate people away from that. That was at least. I would love to see where like conservative ideology on this is now, because are conservatives today, and of course I'm doing some deep diving, but like. Is there still like abstinence only thought around at all today?
June.
I think we'll explore that a little bit next week. Yeah, we're going to be exploring that. Yeah,
we will. But I do have a bit of a doozy for us to wrap up our episode in a little bit.
Oh, beautiful. But before we move on, I do love that there's just a real possibility that they'll look at that graph that you showed me earlier and be like, oh, 1%. That's pretty good. Pretty good. Like pretty good. Yeah.
I do want though to present that argument actually for the sake of like being, I don't know, fair to both sides. I don't just want to set up a straw man to knock it down, right? Like I really do want to present the pro abstinence only argument for what it is. And so that line of argument usually works like this. Being abstinent as a teenager correlates with better overall self-reported health and mental well-being. That's true, right? That is borne out in all of the scientific data.
Interesting.
Abstinence-only education programs have a track record of sometimes correlating with kids staying abstinent. That is also true.
I like the use of sometimes. It's really carrying that whole sentence there. Yeah.
And the effects of like, you tend to have sex later on, that sort of thing. That is true.
Yeah.
But obviously there's some problems with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
First big one is that abstinence versus non-abstinence is not the only important thing to measure.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would argue from a public health perspective, whether or not you're having sex it's not that it's not important at all, but it's less important from a public health perspective than are you getting sexually transmitted infections? Are you getting pregnant?
Right.
And like those
we
sorts
didn't
of things.
talk too much about like STIs at all in this episode, but I mean, that's of course a huge reason to continue to use contraception. And I'm glad we got away from the abstinence only education, especially like after the AIDS crisis in the 80s, like that obviously that was the way forward, and it's a real shame that it took so long to finally get there.
And obviously comprehensive sex education strongly correlated with use of condoms, which is one of the most effective methods of preventing transmission of STIs.
Right.
Secondly, the studies that the supporters of abstinence only sex education cite, they tend to usually just compare abstinence-only sex education to not getting sex education at all.
Which as we know, of course, like just being aware of sex is probably going to change your perception of it.
Exactly.
Like being taught the existence of it will change how it is like perceived in your mind. So like that's not really a win. That's just like, oh, you're doing the bare minimum to tell kids about being human.
Right. It's also kind of funny, like I found a Heritage Foundation report about this stuff, which cites a lot of real peer-reviewed data, but alongside it, cites a bunch of studies that are not peer-reviewed, and you have to go all the way down to the appendix to see what's peer-reviewed and what isn't.
That's awesome.
Because, again, they're intellectually dishonest, right? They're hiding the ball. I also just wanted to quote here from a Journal of Adolescent Health article from 2017 called Abstinence-Only Until Marriage, an updated review of U.S. policies and programs and their impact, which says, and I quote, U.S. abstinence-only until marriage policies and programs are not effective, violate adolescent rights, stigmatize or exclude many youth, and reinforce harmful gender stereotypes. Adolescent sexual and reproductive health promotion should be based on scientific evidence and understanding, public health principles, and human rights. It is important to recognize that many advocates of abstinence-only until marriage programs are primarily concerned with issues such as character and morality, while health professionals are generally concerned with health behaviors and health outcomes. Right. This helps to explain the disconnect between these two groups.
It's
and I
a totally
think that's
different
true.
Conversation. Yeah,
exactly.
It's two groups having totally different conversations. That's a really great point to bring up. Absolutely. I feel like something that, of course, just in this statement alone, that would raise like hell from right wingers would be even the idea that adolescents can have rights or like agency of their own, and that's just like another disconnect in all of this conversation. It is a totally different conversation.
And I'm just not even sure how to get people speaking the same language, because these are just, as you said, such different conversations, but also such incompatible ways of seeing the world.
I feel like I have this moment a lot whenever I'm just thinking about like the general politics of the world and just like whatever the discourse might be. And like whenever you hit that point when you realize, or when I realize in this instance, that I am arguing with someone who is just straight up not talking to me about the thing I am talking about, but we're going back and forth as if we are. It's just like, you just take a step back and it's like, what do you even do? Like, how do you remedy? Like, you just can't remedy this, because even if you point out that this is a different conversation, that won't stop them. Like you won't all of a sudden be like, oh wow, you're right, you're being rational and I wasn't. Like, wow, like that just won't necessarily happen, at least in my experience.
No, you're right. And I think that's what's always really bothered me too about the whole, like, I don't know, the whole West Wing, defeating your enemy with facts and logic, right? Like if they're having a different conversation, they're not going to hear you. And similarly, when you talk about the framework of this abstinence-only sex education stuff, because they are concerned with character and morality, the things that they are putting forward are going to be about what it means to be a good person in their view. And that means, obviously, gender stereotypes. It means, as I mentioned before, just totally ignoring even the existence of those who are already sexually active, either by choice or not. And of course, stigmatizing sexual minorities, whether you're talking about trans people, gay people, or whatever.
Yeah, something I always think back to when I was in like high school, especially, I was one of those edgy Reddit atheists at the time. I'm still like agnostic, but it was of that era of people that were like that age in like the early 2010s know what I'm talking about, the like Reddit atheist phase that a lot of people had in those days. But I would have conversations with pretty far right religious people in my high school all the time, and they would be like, if you don't believe in God, how do you believe, like, you can't believe that killing people is wrong?
Where do you draw
and
first principles from? Because if it doesn't say, if you don't have a text written down that says killing people is bad, how do you know that killing people is bad? Yeah,
exactly. And it's just like those conversations that you have over and over, and it's like you will never meet them where they're talking, because I am not talking in that realm. That's not how I base my worldview. I'm not basing my worldview in the same bare bones framework that they are. So how can you even converse in that way?
Well, and to the point of frameworks, June, to sort of wrap up our episode here, I brought you a treat. Okay.
Oh, I love treats. I love like tasty little morsels. Especially
I know you
for
love
the
treats,
mind.
and I know you love lists, like lists of promises and principles and things like that.
I was gonna say my favorite part of the show so far is when you bring me a new list to that we get to go over. I feel like I always laugh the most at these lists.
Well, remember how during the Focus on the Family episode, I talked about the Family Research Council, which is the organization parallel to Focus that exists to agitate for policy changes that benefit the traditional nuclear family?
Of course.
All right. Well, I've got here a 2020 pamphlet called Sex Education in Public Schools, Sexualization of Children and LGBT Indoctrination. And so, June, it is time to talk about the 15 harmful elements of comprehensive sexuality education.
No way. And this is 2020. This is like brand new. This is like pretty clearly after abstinence-only education lost the war.
Yeah. But, you know, they'll never lose the war, you know? They're always going to keep fighting. So, Number 1, it sexualizes children. Normalizes child sex or desensitizes children to sexual things. May give examples of children having sex or imply many of their peers are sexually active. May glamorize sex use graphic materials, teach explicit sexual vocabulary, or encourage discussion of sexual experiences, attractions, fantasies, or desires. Now, very interesting use of the word children here, right?
Yeah.
Because already we're seeing something that they love to do. That the right loves to do when they're framing up this stuff, which is to flatten a range of curricula targeted to a range of maturity levels and make it sound as if they are saying, you know, Joycelyn Elders is going to come into your kindergarten and teach your fucking 5-year-old to masturbate, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's even the language that this bullet point uses, the sexualizes children. They do that intentionally to make it sound a lot more harsh, a lot more scary. Like what? It's crazy that sexualizes children. Like this includes people that are 17 or whatever, getting health sex education about like STIs. Like that falls under this category, under this. Under the classification that they're talking about here. And that's just absurd. And they, of course, do that intentionally. It is propaganda tool to cause public freakout. I'm sure, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, there's been so much public panic about books being in public libraries for like children or like teens or adolescents, as if that's a bad thing.
Number 2, and this is fucking crazy to me. Number 2, this is something you need to be careful of, is that a bad curriculum, a curriculum that's a cause for concern, is one that teaches children to consent to sex. And I read here, may teach children how to negotiate sexual encounters or how to ask for or get consent from other children to engage in sexual acts with them. Note, consent is often taught under the banner of sexual abuse prevention. While this may be appropriate for adults, children of minor age should never be encouraged to consent to sex.
Insane. Just absurd. Like, what else can I say other than this? This is just insane.
This is nuts.
This is the fact that they even mention the abuse prevention. Like, of course, that's what this is about. Like, what do you mean it might be put under the banner of it? No, that's what that's about. That is straight up what it is. Like, you can't just like dance around it. That's what it is.
Yes.
That's absurd.
And also, generally speaking, for comprehensive sex ed, the framework is, hey, the consent is one of the most important things. It's like the most important thing that you can withhold, and it's totally up to you.
Yeah.
And that means that if anybody ever wants something from you that you don't want, they don't get it.
Yeah. There's been this like weird, and I've seen this primarily mostly in like right-wing social media, like far-right social media, where they have taken the very public stance that they are just against consent, and that is just a very concerning thing to me.
No, this aligns with broader trends for sure. Okay, number 3, you should be worried about anything that normalizes anal and oral sex. P and V only, I guess. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
It probably is just straight up because that, like, maybe if people are having like oral sex or anal sex, that's less likely that people might have children if it's not like man and a woman traditional style, you know, like it like straight up just might be that.
I guess it's so bizarre to me, this idea of like nobody should learn other ways of doing it in sex education, or that those things exist. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, very weird.
Also, calling them high-risk sexual behaviors, it's like P and V is the highest risk. You could get pregnant.
Yeah.
Whatever. Number 4 promotes homosexual/bisexual behavior.
They had to throw the bisexuals under the bus there.
Yeah, don't dare do it. Number 5. This is fucking crazy to me. Number 5, this is bad if a sex education program promotes sexual pleasure.
Yeah, I've never understood how this one has had bad framing from like as if it's a bad thing from right wingers. I used to know in college some like people that were abstinent only, they weren't planning on having sex until they got married, and they, as far as I know, that's what they ended up doing. I talk to them every once in a while, not about their sex life, but just like about their ideology and like their really religiosity, and I just found it fascinating. And there is just like a weird inherent belief to like the actual true believers that it's not about pleasure. It's not about like loving each other. It's just about having that kid.
Yeah, the duty. The
duty. Yeah.
6. It's the Joycelyn Elders clause. Promote solo and or mutual masturbation. Don't dare do it.
They're like no gooning.
And don't you dare think about touching somebody else.
Well, I don't understand. Like, I mean, I know masturbation has always been seen as like a negative. There was always that like insane panic that people taught that like, oh, if you masturbate, your hands will get hairy, your palms will get hairy, or whatever. This is one of those things I just find fascinatingly weird that they're just like straight up against masturbating. Just bizarre.
Don't dare do it. Don't educate people about it. I also like that they kind of like try to play both sides on this one because it says, well, masturbation can be part of normal child development, encourages masturbation at young ages, which may make children more vulnerable to pornography use, sexual addictions, or sexual exploitation. What are you talking about?
They're somehow saying it's a slippery slope, I guess.
7, promotes condom use in inappropriate ways.
Who's using condoms inappropriately? For fun. Oh, it goes back to the pleasure.
Yeah, you're not allowed to use them for fun. Sexually explicit methods, penis and vagina models. Don't dare do it. Okay,
this
whatever.
This last sentence here is incredible. It may imply that condoms will provide complete protection against pregnancies or STIs. I mean, yeah, roughly, like, especially the STI ones, like, especially so. Yeah, what do you mean may imply that? It does.
If you use it correctly and it doesn't break, yeah, it's pretty close to 100%.
Yeah, it's basically like a hand sanitizer. It's 99.99. Like, come on.
8, promotes early sexual autonomy.
I guess that's bad. I guess understanding yourself is bad.
And this is interesting too because like they point out
the autonomy. The word autonomy there is
Well, that's the thing. They don't want autonomy at all, right? And they even have in here fails to provide data about the well-documented negative consequences of early sexual debut, even though the data shows that comprehensive sex education correlates with roughly the same age of sexual debut as abstinence-only sex education. In fact, it's a little bit later. So whatever, dude. 9, fails to establish abstinence as the expected standard.
They're just straight up mad that they lost that battle. Yeah. They're like, look, we got to pull this one back. We have to teach people abstinence-only education again. 10,
promotes transgender ideology. We are so far off course at this point. Like, what are you?
Yeah, we're talking about pregnancy here. We're talking about sex education, and now we're talking about transgender ideology. This has been like the weirdest, because this, I feel like people were not talking about transgender people the same way, like in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And
no, this is a recent vintage. This is something that has only come up in the past like half decade.
And I don't like, and I think I've outlined this on the show before, where it's like they took a step back, right wingers took a step back, and were like, where can we kind of focus the culture war now? And they identified like, oh, we can maybe exploit trans people and like battle that way. And the reason that they do this, the reason that it seems so shocking and weird, and it is to include this in a thing about sex education. But the reason this is here, and just like the first point, it's a ulterior motive. They're trying to conflate being transgender as like a sexual deviancy or like a sickness or just that it's like a bad, it's like an immoral act. It's something that will corrupt your children, your innocent children. It is to scare. It is a scaremongering tactic.
This is a great example of yet another thing where these are two different conversations happening, right?
Absolutely.
Where it's like to the extent that a comprehensive sex education program is going to be talking about, being trans or whatever, it's going to be like, hey, if you got that girl dick, here's some ways that you could potentially have sex, and here's how to do it safely. But they see it as you are endorsing transgenderism and therefore contributing to moral decline.
Right. Yeah, no, it is the peak of the moral panic right now. And they're intentionally conflating it with like deviancy.
Number 11, promotes contraception / abortion to children.
Insane.
Whatever, it's what you expect here. 12, promotes peer-to-peer sex ed or sexual rights advocacy. Don't advocate for yourselves. Don't do it.
They're just straight up against advocacy. I love that.
13, undermines traditional values and beliefs. Come on. Now you're just padding out the list. That's nothing.
I feel like we could fit this one under a couple other the bullet points.
14, undermines parents or parental rights.
That's been a big thing in the recent years. I feel like we've seen that play out, especially in states like Florida, where parental rights have been a very mobilizing cause for the conservative Christian movement.
And then finally, number 15, refers children to harmful resources. They don't want anybody to be going to Planned Parenthood's website. That's basically what that is. I feel like they could have gotten this down to 10 with some better editing. This was not really 15.
I could easily cut out like at least 6 of these, and maybe you can like combine like some of those into a 10th one. Like they should have consulted us on this, I think.
I mean, say what you will about the Promise Keepers. There were 7 promises. You know what I mean? And it was like
very concise.
They were concise promises that were pretty clear. This is a mess. Anyway, that was Sex Education in Public Schools, Sexualization of Children, and LGBT Indoctrination by Kathy Ruse. The big ruse was making me read that shit from the Family Research Council. I have a little bit more stuff in this outline about what happened with the Obama administration, but I've realized we're going to be talking about that next week.
Yeah, we'll expand more on this conversation and bring us up to the current modern day, 2025, where we're at right now. So if we miss something, especially in like the 2000s, we'll probably be getting to that very soon. Very excited to round out this conversation soon.
So, June, what are the big things that you sort of took away from this episode that maybe you didn't know before, or things that you understand a little bit better now based on what we talked about?
I didn't actually know that abstinent education. I knew it was kind of a flop. I know that we eventually shifted away from that, but I didn't realize like just quite the extent of how nothing it was. Like how it like actually genuinely had no a change in like sexual habits of adolescents at all. Like that graph that hopefully we should link this somehow in the show notes, because it truly is astonishing.
Maybe I'll make that graph the episode art.
Wait, that would be crazy. You should do it, because it's like truly astonishing just how awful abstinent education is. I feel like that is like all you really need to see to just be like, oh, this fucking sucks.
It doesn't, to the extent that it works, it's working because it is telling people about sex. But as an actual approach to helping adolescents live healthier lifestyles and understand their own bodies, it doesn't fucking work at all.
Not at all. And I think just the learning about the like 90s shift in the Clinton administration is just really fucking dire, and really does explain the place we were in like the 2000s and the first Bush administration and how we got there. It's very, very, it's always very fascinating when you look at history and it all starts to line up.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to be doing until we record next.
What's up?
Well, I was taught by this pamphlet, right, what it is that I need to do in order to keep my children safe. And I'm going to take advantage of the Family Research Council's form letter, which will opt my children, my beautiful, beautiful children, who exist, by the way, out of any class, assignment, activity, etc., that involves gender identity, sexual activity, sexual orientation, or abortion/contraception. No, just kidding. I'm not going to do that. I don't have kids. But you know what? I wish these motherfuckers had never been born. Anyway, I'm Josh. I'll see you next week.
See ya.